The sky was a perfect, endless blue with only a few blackbirds gliding on the wind, until suddenly a wyvern burst through the drifting clouds, soaring high with its mouth wide open, showing sharp, gleaming fangs and glowing yellow eyes full of fierce light. It soars freely through the air, a wild spirit made just for the sky. Beneath it all, a man stands silent, lost in awe at such freedom, remembering how a bruised and bloody hero from the great Declan house once burned with determination to walk away from his dangerous life as a troubleshooter. There was only one reason, and then the scene changed. Dark clouds cover the sky, crows scream far away, and in this lonely place, two men face each other while the main character holds his enemy up by the neck with magic alone, saying coldly that he is the last one left, even as the other man gasps for air. Turns out, you were keeping your special abilities hidden the whole time. Our hero smiles, a faint devilish curve forming on his lips while his blue eyes flash like lightning. With electricity crawling over his skin, the man grits his teeth as the hero calmly pulls out a magic book to ask the questions instead, chuckling that even trash from the Declan family deserves a whole pack of trouble. The man stammers that he doesn't know how the thing works, but the hero thinks that if the greedy Declan had known, he surely wouldn't have hidden it in a dusty cellar, and since they chased him all the way here despite not knowing its secrets, it must be very valuable. The man then pleads to give him the tome so he can ask the head to spare the hero's life and even get him reinstated as a troubleshooter, but the hero tilts his head and wonders what power a mere troubleshooter manager has to make that promise, causing the man to fall silent with fear in his eyes. The hero gives a faint smile and asks for one last wish, but the man screams curses at him, and the hero just shrugs as the man finally shows his true colors. How truthful of you, but now everything is different and a cold feeling fills the air. The hero's eyes tighten as he turns around. A figure steps forward wrapped in a blazing red glow, speaking with a calm voice that shows amazing instinct. He puts on a fur coat, grabs his staff, and smiles as he says hello, introducing himself as Farron von Declan, the head of the magical house on the eastern continent. The hero's eyes go wide as the head himself appears, and Finn smiles politely to say he'd like to take the tome before they talk, his calm face hiding total confidence while the hero thinks back. For more than 10 years, he has been the guy called in to fix any mess. He dedicated half his life to serving the cause. But this was the first time he'd met the legendary strongest mage himself, and just looking at him, the guy knew he was in deep trouble. A real pain in the backside, he thinks dryly as the hero smirks and asks, "You just want to take something I earned, huh? That's a pretty low bar, even by your standards." Farron laughs out loud, and the hero tries to laugh back, but his heart aches because he realizes he should never have eaten that wyvern. Farron taps his staff on the ground and says, "I could just kill you and take the book, but I'll be nice, go back to Declan, hand over the tome, and I'll let you go free." He says your talent is amazing and it's hard to believe we missed someone like you, then calls you a dirty stray from the gray zone who only knows cheap tricks, but offers to take you under his wing to make you his greatest weapon and write history together. The hero quietly nods to himself as dark clouds twist overhead and a lone bird flies through the stormy sky, a final sign that the wyvern is free. Farn smiled with delight, and just as he was ready to start, the hero stepped in with one request. He asked to sit at the head of the table, and only then would Farn agree. Farron's smile vanishes as anger flashes in his eyes, he clenches his fist while the falling manager gasps in terror, tightens his neck, and drops dead, leaving the hero to casually ask, "Can you even count how many died to this?" which only makes Farron's rage grow as he warns, "So, this is how it's going to be. You might actually die this time." The hero hesitates, admitting deep down that he's right, before clenching his fist and charging forward with all his might. But Farron lifts a magical shield and blocks the attack with ease. The hero grins and says that you never know who's taller until you measure, so Farron chuckles and offers to show him the difference, only for the ground to crack and stone spikes to shoot up while the hero blocks desperately with sweat on his face as Farron handles the spell with ease. Dodging out of the way, the hero thinks, this is what Deacon's head is capable of. Farron's voice cuts through the storm like a sharp knife, stopping the hero dead in his tracks with a wall of silence, but Finn just smirks and blasts the gap wide open because some things don't need measuring to be seen. The explosion shakes the ground, and while he says you're lucky because he only grazed you, the hero stands behind a bleeding rock, coughing and wondering if bowing his head will make them believe him, but Farron just raises an eyebrow and asks if that's likely, prompting the hero to roar that he's done with scraps. Magic explodes around him as he laughs like a madman, refusing to be a dog just because the leash is shiny or the house is big, because he knows it's still just a cage. Farron snarls in disgust, calls forth a massive glowing circle, and attacks. The hero spits blood and screams, "Bastard," while lightning crashes all around him. In that moment, the hero flashes back to the wyvern soaring freely through the open sky. That's why I looked up that day, Aaron said, sounding impressed, because you survived. Not bad. Did you feel the difference in power? The hero asks weakly while leaning against a rock, bruised and bleeding, as Fan smiles coldly and says, you're insanely strong, so are you ready to talk or shall we finish this? What? You want me to be a troubleshooter again? Farron smirks, but then adds, oh no, I want you to be the head of the Bangshin family, leaving the hero staring in shock at the name of the mightiest clan on the eastern continent that was once strong enough to challenge the throne. They asked him to join one of their family clans as a vassal. He finally gets it, and now he sees that this is the true goal you've been chasing. Farron nods, telling you that you're still not seeing your own worth, and he wants both you and the book. The hero lifts up the book, and Farron smiles as she reaches out to grab it. You made a wise choice, your sins are wiped away, and now you stand proudly with the clan, but the hero suddenly burns the book while Farron gasps in shock, only for the hero to smirk back. You asked if I would accept it, even if it meant turning to ash. Farah's face twists in pure rage, and she hisses that you'll regret this because she'll make sure of it, then demands silence. The hero slashes the enemy's path, and while he insists he's not in it for the cash since troubleshooters live paycheck to paycheck, the villain watches his book burn and coldly admits he kept it only because it was worth something. Ever heard about the troubleshooter who got eaten by Declan's young master? Farron freezes in horror. Forbidden magic makes the hero's voice shake with fury as he screams that the bastard ate his friends and that Declan tried to hide it. Farron squinted his eyes, realizing this was all for revenge, while the hero chuckled quietly and asked why he'd bother, knowing just how cheaply a troubleshooter's life is valued. He looks up with blood dripping from his chin, a faint smile spreading across his face as he admits that getting what they wanted cost a lot of money. So yeah, I'm retiring, Farron turned away with a cold tone, considering that your last words. With a snap of his fingers, blue flames swirl around the hero as Farron reveals that this is Declan's eternal fire that never dies, urging anyone who steps into it to regret every choice they make. The hero stands inside the fire, laughing, as if regret is just a silly thought. Not a chance, he grins wild and free, laughing so hard that the blue fire in his eyes reflects his joy, whispering that even if he dies now without seeing it through, he has no regrets and promises to find true freedom and take revenge the right way in his next life as the swirling wind blows around him. Then out of nowhere, everything went quiet, and his clothes were burnt while his armor was broken. His pants somehow survived, though his eyes went wide in disbelief as everything around him froze. Everything froze in midair as the magic tome hovered above his hand, glowing with power, while a living golden circle burned on his chest, leaving him staring in stunned confusion. The next scene opens on a quiet, dusty street shrouded in a thin fog of smoke and sand, where a ragged little boy sits clutching a small tin bowl, blinking in confusion as if he just woke from a nightmare and can't quite believe he's alive again. His heart races as the noisy, smelly world of garbage slowly comes back to him. The biting cold wind tore right through his tattered clothes. He hears the distant sounds of people walking past without looking, and suddenly it clicks. This is the gray zone, the slum where he used to beg for food every day before his life spiraled into madness. He drags himself to the river and stares at the younger face looking back at him, whispering, "That's me." He stops and feels a strange heat under his shirt where the glowing fire seal burns on his chest, and though his eyes widen in shock that this mark is still here after coming back in time, he breathes out and starts to put the pieces together, wondering if the magic tome really sent him back, but knowing that if the lazy head of the Declan family came all this way for it, it must be something huge. He shakes his head with a faint grin, muttering that it doesn't matter since it feels like a good thing anyway. The stench in the seal lecture hall is so strong that I know I'm not dreaming, but truly alive. A small smile curves his lips as he takes in the fresh morning air, whispering that it feels strong and mighty while the sun warms his face. Anything I do now could work, he pauses and squints, but then wonders what success really means, and suddenly the world blurs as the sunlight turns to gray skies and the heavy quiet of a memory takes hold. He sits on cracked stone steps beside a worn young friend, and they speak softly in the empty street about how they were born as vagrants in the gray zone with nothing, unable to dress well, eat well, or learn anything. Asked if he was hurt, the boy listened silently before asking which pain hurt most, to which the man, clenching his jaw, said it wasn't just hunger that drove them into this pit, but the boy replied flatly that he was fine with it. The man's voice breaks with rage when he shouts that being walked over, forgotten, and treated like dirt is not okay. Astor nervously holds up his hands and agrees to talk, but his comrade lets out a sharp breath, admitting that his lack of education was a painful mistake that turned them into slaves to the powerful, and after staring at the gray sky, Astor vows that if he ever retires, he will build a tall library where anyone can read freely. He's really tall, and while he just loves tall things with a mischievous grin, there is one specific book that must be among the many he gathers with eyes full of mischief. Declan chuckles softly to himself, imagining his secret manual sitting at the front door where anyone, from a street bum to a butcher's son, could pick up a copy and discover forbidden techniques bearing his crest, and while he can't get it yet, the thought of nobles going crazy over it makes him grin. But before he can move, a hard kick slams into his face and sends him flying into the dirt, as a furious voice screams, "You bastard! I kept your seat warm while you hid, but now you're asking for trouble." Aster blinks, dazed and confused as he realizes this ambush is his toughest fight yet, gritting his teeth even as he realizes he's a veteran of countless battles who can handle ground war but has never faced the sky. Aster, glaring up, mutters that 7 hits from you deserve 70 back, but as he swings a punch that instantly hurts him more than the man, he watches in shock as the unflinching stranger just slams another punch right into his face. Punch after punch rains down until Aster curls into a ball, gasping as his face burns and eyes tear up, feeling the sting of pain but knowing his pride hurts even more. Then fate steps in, the bully slips on a loose rock and tumbles into the river with a splash, leaving Aster to grin, bolt, and sprint away while muttering that it's not running away, but a tactical retreat, because he's a veteran troubleshooter who wears every hit like a medal and doesn't know the word quit. Aster sinks onto the cold ground of a narrow alley, gasping for air while wincing at his swollen wrist, muttering that the one punch was far more than he could handle and that his body is far too fragile for such power. Forget about the tower for now, I must fix this body first. A gentle voice breaks through his thoughts, asking if he's hungry. Aster looks up to see a boy his own age standing there in clean clothes that look old but fine, and when Aster asks if he knows him, the boy just shakes his head gently. Aster watches the boy closely, seeing the fancy clothes as a sign that he's probably some fallen noble, but when the shy boy introduces himself as Damien and proudly mentions his mom is Bianca, Aster just blinks in disbelief. "Why do I feel like I wasn't meant to know that?" he asks bluntly, his eyes wild with suspicion. Damon's smile vanishes as he admits he has no mom, so he claims victory by saying he has no dad and suggests we part ways. Aster turns to walk away, thinking there's no way she's dealing with this kid, but Damien just stands right there and won't move. Aster snaps, "Aren't you leaving?" and Damon calmly replies, "I'm going with you," which makes Aster grit his teeth and mutter to himself, "Should I just smack him? No. Piss off." But Damon steps closer and reaches out his hand, asking if the pain hurts before a glowing circle appears under his palm to begin healing Aster's wrist, causing him to realize that this is Damon's special magic touch. Aster freezes in shock, realizing that the magic touch isn't just healing, it's a powerful spell that makes his instincts scream. This kid isn't normal, he carries the secret magic of the Blander family, the same clan Declan once destroyed, but in this timeline, they haven't fallen yet, and he mutters it almost without thinking. Damien von Blander tilts his head and asks, "Did you call me?" Aster freezes in horror as one of Damien's eyes shifts color, sending a cold shiver down his spine as he realizes this is the future where a man with those same eyes became a feared monster. The Mad Butcher of Blander, a legend who refused to stay dead no matter how many times he was killed, is now just a cheerful kid crouching beside him and smiling at the ants. Aster, who was just my size, suddenly pressed a hand to his forehead and asked if this kid had really turned into a monster, making my second life feel way too complicated. Sometimes, when he gazed at that kid's silly grin, he couldn't help but remember his past life as a troubleshooter before the big change, recalling the time he was sent by the Declants to handle the Blander family's mess, a pointless task he thought, until he realized these powerful nobles always dumped their dirty laundry on others like him, making him mutter, "What do I care about their secret feuds? We fix problems, not politics," especially with rumors spreading that a monster was hiding in the soft estate. Dozens were dead, and while he first thought of an ogre, the monster he saw that day was something else entirely. There stood a man, ripping through others with his bare hands, laughing as he bathed in their blood while casting healing magic on himself. That crazy laugh belonged to the man they called the Mad Butcher of Blander. And that terrifying monster wasn't anyone else but Damien von Blander, so the hero looked over at the same Damien sitting right beside him. While poking at ants with a stick, he blinked in disbelief at how this cheerful kid could one day become such a nightmare, wondering why a noble heir was hanging out in a filthy alley before Damon suddenly poked his shoulder and shouted, "Food. Let's eat," he grinned and added, "because my mom says healthy people eat well, and you're sick from not eating enough." The hero sighed, then smirked a little, thinking, "Well, at least you didn't punch me this time," before asking out loud, "All right, you got money?" Damien tilted his head at that, then pulled out a pouch overflowing with gold coins. "Of course, what else could you expect from a rich kid?" The hero whispered the name, and Damon looked up. The hero declared they were now friends, and with a blink from Damon and a wide, eager smile from Damien, the truth settled in as the hero's sly grin showed he knew how to play the game, so the two set off to eat together. As Damien strolled and asked his friend what he had, the hero grinned and replied, "Me? I've got a friend," causing Damien to freeze before bursting into laughter and saying, "That's so cool," just as night fell. Under the pale moonlight, the two of them lay resting after eating their fill and washing up, and the hero finally felt human again as he noticed Damien looking around curiously before asking, "What are you doing?" Damon admitted he never knew about the house above their meal and always slept outside, so the hero nodded and asked if he had a father, leading to a confused argument until the hero sighed and decided they needed facts, prompting Damien to reveal he had been alone since running away and counting 10 sleeps despite taking many naps. "Sometimes twice a day," the hero muttered, while Damien yawned and complained that the hard ground kept him from napping, noting that crazy people really do start early. Even though he had his doubts, he spotted a chance to use the kid as a temporary nanny, which would also help him get closer to the Blander family and their huge collection of books. He settled down to warn Damon he was going to sleep, threatening big trouble if anyone bothered him, only for Damien to suddenly sit up and ask if he was doing breathing practice, to which the hero smirked and promised that once he finished, Damien would do it too. Damien agreed with a happy smile, closed his eyes to focus his breathing, and let his mind wander back to how he had built his magic foundation with standard troubleshooter spells in his past life. They were powerful, but not enough, so he broke into noble homes to steal secret arts, surviving death itself to master hardened bodies, spirit magic, summoning, and alchemy, only to finally fall to something so vast it felt like true catastrophe. That was why he decided to finally master the Declan family's core technique, the Heavenly Origin method, a flexible power that adapts to any magic energy and which he had studied long ago but could now truly wield, and as he began, a burning, molten pain surged through his veins like lava crawling beneath his skin. He clenched his teeth and gasped for air, pushing hard to focus as dark impurities began to glow within his mana, realizing this power was meant only for nobles born with pure blood. It burned out all the unworthy stuff inside him, filling the room with a quiet buzz as magical energy rained down on him like a shower. Sweat ran down his face as his body shook, and then the room fell silent. He snapped his eyes open and gasped for air. Damien slept beside him, snoring softly, but now his circuits were clean and his mana felt stronger and smoother than ever, so he tightened his fist and smiled, knowing that even if he couldn't beat the Declants today, he still had a chance because he was a troubleshooter who never gave up. As morning quietly crept in, Damien yawned and rubbed his hand through his hair, which had finally turned brown, and he shouted, "Whoa, my hair is brown." The hero had dyed Damon's famous white hair and even swapped out his clothes. Now the Blander family wouldn't recognize him, and Damon, looking pleased as he fixed his cap, asked, "So, what are we doing now, friend?" The hero smirked and said they were going to cause a little chaos, but a nearby thug stretched and yawned about the nice weather until he froze in shock, realizing the guy he'd been hunting, the youngest of them all, was standing right in front of him with the hero already cracking his knuckles. The thug stuttered, "Hey, where do you think you're going? And what's with that look? Did you bathe in a gutter?" He looked at Damien. "And what's with this rich-looking kid?" The hero grinned. "Yep, found the right place." His fist slammed into the thug's face. "Since you still remember me," he said calmly. "You'll take 123 punches first." The thug screamed and stumbled back as others rushed forward, but one stopped, recognizing the hero and asking, "Wait, isn't that the youngest?" The hero smirked, and he and Damien shared a glance, both wearing that same mischievous, dangerous grin as he cracked his neck and whispered, "Let's see how far we can go today," while his friend Damon laughed excitedly beside him, asking if it was a game, before Aster moved fast to handle the rest of the gang with ease, his fists glowing faintly with mana and landing harder strikes with each hit, while Damien watched from the corner and whispered in awe about using mana to tighten his fists. And strike faster. Aster lands a solid hit, shouts for Damien, smashes another guy, declares, "This is what you call awesome," and Damien's face lights up like a child's with shining eyes. Aster keeps punching until the thug collapses, then Damien kneels beside him with a cheerful, "Don't worry, you won't feel any pain. I'll heal you," and a soft green gold light glows as he casts his magic, causing the groggy thug to stammer a thank you while Aster, still grinning, grabs him by the collar and asks, "So, how many times did I hit you?" before the man screams again. As the day faded from morning to sunset, the whole group lay flat on the ground until one poor soul sat up with his back turned, practically begging for another round. Aster hits the guy right where it hurts most, and Aster asks calmly how many times he had to do it, while Damien excitedly heals everyone they can before the whole group lines up, bows deeply, and thanks him for the day. Aster nods with a satisfied smile, feeling proud of the great energy, while Damien giggles and calls it done so they can play again, and Aster smirks because throwing over 1,000 punches today has been quite a workout for him, even for a seasoned troubleshooter. One thug nervously raises his hand, asking if they can leave, so Aster shrugs and says, "Sure, go ahead." But the man stammers, "But this is my house." Aster tilts his head with a smug grin and asks if they really want us to go, causing the thug to panic and wave his hands frantically to say no, so the entire gang scrambles away in fear. Aster watches them run and thinks, it's just the way things go, but then a sharp, hidden presence slices through the air, moving too fast and skilled for a random thug, so he frowns in confusion, wondering how they found him despite his careful plans. With his mana almost gone, casting spells is nearly impossible, so he mutters that hand-to-hand combat is his only choice, squeezes every last drop of magic into his fist, and believes this will be enough. He thrusts his arm forward, blasting a tight stream of mana that knocks the rushing figure down to his knees. Aster's eyes tighten as the man finally comes into view. Alfredo, the Blander family's butler, gasps in shock, "Oh heavens, young master." Damien flinches in shock, and the butler rushes forward, sobbing that he's been searching everywhere for him, wondering how he could be so reckless and stating he hasn't slept in days because of this worry. Damien struggles to break free, but Alfredo holds him tight and promises to ensure the young master returns home, even if it costs him his life, while Aster watches in surprise as the butler apologizes for the scene and introduces himself as Alfredo of the Blander family. Yeah, I'm Aster," Alfredo says with a smile, noting that young Master Damien clearly cares for you and asking if you'd like to join them at the Blander estate. Aster raises an eyebrow at the mention of the Blander family, wondering what nobles like them truly want, but he smiles anyway since he was going to meet them regardless. "Sure, thank you for the offer," Alfredo nods once more as I go to get the carriage. Aster pauses to think, realizing he's wandered off his library path, but decides that a new chance is better than nothing. He fastens his shirt, gives a knowing smirk, and says, "All right, let's see what kind of food the Blander family serves." The carriage rolls through the grand gates of the Blander mansion, where Alfredo proudly shouts that they've arrived, and as Aster steps out to gaze at the luxurious manor and the rows of servants lined up outside, the story takes a turn. Alfredo passes Damien to a stern young woman named Lancency, tells her to rest well before he leaves her with the children, and then she nods and sharply orders Damien to follow her. Damien turns pale and shakes with fear, whispering that he made a terrible mistake as the moonlight shines down on the vast halls inside. Alfredo knocks on the door, where a calm voice invites him in, and he steps through to bow before the woman sitting there and tell her that he has brought young Master Damien home safely from the 7th Black and White Zone. The woman's face instantly shifts as she asks about the 7th Zone and whether he is hurt, causing her magic to flare and the room to shake until Alfredo rushes to reassure her that he is unharmed, which finally lets her breathe a sigh of relief. Alfredo nods and thinks it's a lucky thing for both the lady and the man who hurt her son, since few could survive the Blood Witch's anger, while the matron offers a faint smile and says he did well. "It's my duty, madam," he replies, though he quickly adds that there is something strange about it. She tilts her head, looking puzzled by the strange story about the friend young Master Damien made. Her eyes tighten a bit. "Is that Aster?" Alfredo speaks more quietly, noting that the boy knew he was there before he even showed up and was ready to fight back the moment he appeared, then he stops. In his hand sat a mana bullet, and as the matron's eyes turned red, the child from the Black and White Zone leaned back with a thoughtful smile, wondering how interesting this was. Alfredo bowed once more, then explained that's exactly why he wanted to ask for a special favor. In the very next second, his voice boomed out with a loud echo. Boy steps in front of Aster, glowing with golden light and asking him to take their place, leaving Aster wide-eyed and speechless. "What?" Alfredo thought, his mind buzzing with thrill as he realized that refusing such a golden offer from a noble butler would be nothing short of foolishness. Aster scratches his neck and calmly says, "No," leaving Alfredo frozen with a trembling mustache and Damien confused, while Aster thanks the butler for the offer but explains he prefers things as they are, prompting Alfredo to quietly admire the stray boy's natural talent for magic. Alfredo stands tall and says, "I get it, I grew up in a regular family just like you, lost and not knowing where I could go," then looks hard at Aster and adds, "Kid, this world is huge." Aster nodded his agreement, confirming that it wasn't a small matter at all. As Alfredo's face softens, you suddenly feel like you could conquer the whole world. Aster shakes his head, whispering that it isn't so. Alfredo turns bright red but holds his ground, telling the child to just endure, reminding them that they are like the goblins in the canyon who know nothing about the dangers outside. Aster points to the picture of the wyvern and says in a quiet voice, "I think I'm like one." Alfredo grits his teeth, thinking to himself, this boy knows nothing. He stomps his foot down hard and growls, "I'm going to show him just how huge and scary this world really is." Alfredo guides Aster into the mansion, where young trainees waiting inside shout, "Master Butler." Alfredo tells Aster to watch them, noting that they are your age but are the official talents of House Blando, and as Aster studies them carefully, he realizes that House Blando is no joke. He can't believe these kids are still teens but act so tough, and even with soft auras, the room feels packed with power. He squints and mutters, "Look at their eyes. They're like a pack of goblins," he muttered to himself. "Yes, I feel it," Alfredo asks, "so will you take my offer? I promise, if you become my successor, you won't just shine like everyone else, you'll shine brighter than anyone." Aster shakes his head with a small smile, admitting he can't stand being in the spotlight, while Alfredo lets out a disappointed sigh and asks, "Child, why?" Suddenly, one trainee steps forward. Alfredo steps in to question Winto, who smiles with confidence and argues that if Aster truly felt something, he wouldn't have rejected the offer, but Alfredo believes Aster simply hasn't felt it yet. "If you let me, I'd love to share a bit of experience with him." Alfredo raises an eyebrow as Windstor shakes his head, refusing a duel and instead promising to give the challenger just a taste of what true magic really is. Alfredo thinks the kid is full of himself, but he agrees with the plan. He turns to Aster and asks, "Child, what do you think about this simple duel with the young man?" Aster glares at Windstor, admitting that he feels the sting of being seen as a lucky nobody who just popped out of nowhere. Aster asks if she can pick her own opponent. Alfredo nods to say yes, and she chooses 5 trainees to face them. With Windstor included, he stands ready to face all 5 enemies at once. The trainees stand frozen in shock as Aster stares them down with pure anger, leaving them terrified and doomed to meet their end. Alfredo laughs out loud, proving he has the right spirit to take the lead. He adds, asking the child if they can handle the weight of their words, noting that some might think it's disrespecting House Blando, to which Aster smirks and says they'll take responsibility while Alfredo nods in agreement. "Good, so let's start," he issues a challenge, giving you just 1 minute to survive or face the consequences. Aster realizes the old man wants him to take over, suspects a trap, but stands his ground and says yes, while one nervous trainee asks if it's really that dangerous. Alfredo answers with a sharp nod, insisting that his stubbornness is what makes him valuable, and he believes Aster must break through that wall to truly grow, a thought that makes the drowsy instructor grimace in fear since a single mistake against the young master's guest would end his career. Damien steps close and presses a finger to the instructor's lips to keep him calm, and the instructor freezes right there. "Why, young master?" Winster shouts, "Your friend is in real danger, so please stop," and Damien's eyes widen with shock. He clutches his head and cries out, "Oh, my God," as Lance warns Damien that Lady Gamma will scold him if he gets involved, so Damien smiles nervously and agrees to stay back while Alfredo glares at the instructor. "Instructor, start the match," he mutters to himself, cursing the delay, and the instructor finally agrees with a reluctant, "Yes, understood," thinking, orders are orders, I've done my best, while Lance tells Damien, "I'll be back soon, so don't get involved," to which Damien nods. The instructor shows the trainee 2 rules, starting by telling her that it is her turn. Alfredo jumps in, turning it into a wild free-for-all while the instructor rushes to warn everyone. The fight is open until one side gives up, but I can call it off anytime, so watch out. Winto grips his fists and whispers that this kid thinks he runs the world, vowing to crush him and prove his worth, so the instructor shouts, "Begin," and Aster fires a powerful blue mana bullet at Windstor. The trainees' faces turn as white as sheets. Even though Windstor springs back to his feet, the 5 trainees crash to the ground, groaning in pain. Aster floats in a ring of dark blue magic and turns to Windstor, saying, "I think it's best if I show you the lesson myself, and remember, never underestimate the small guy." Windstor screams in fear as he realizes Aster just fired a mana bullet at him. He scoffs at the expensive mana that proves useless in real fights, but as Aster hovers with a glowing aura and shoves the trainee down to face Windstor, the lesson is clear: don't judge people too easily, especially when mana bullets blast the others to the ground to show that this world is vast and cruel. Aster kept going, walking up to Windstor with his fist clenching tight and a grin on his face. Aster plants a hard punch on Winder's swollen face, declares that he will now teach them the true art of magic, and as Winder screams in disbelief, Aster calmly kicks him again to prove that this incredible power is very much real. Butler Alfredo's eyes went wide in shock as he realized the bullet had been squeezed with such crushing force that it must have been packed at least 4 or 5 times. As he remembered meeting his old master for the first time and wondered if his magic bullet had truly hit the mark, he couldn't help but be amazed by Aster's incredible natural talent for controlling mana. On the side, Damien watched with gleaming eyes as hands healed, and he whispered in awe while Alfredo's mind raced. How can he defeat everyone so easily, he wondered, feeling both amazed and scared, just as a calm yet sharp voice called out from the hallway, "Alfredo." Alfredo stopped dead in his tracks. "That voice," he whispered, turning around in a panic. "Lady Gamo, it's you. What are you doing here?" Meanwhile, Lance had secretly brought her to save them after seeing the chaos unfold, while in the back, Instructor Runfit watched with tears welling in his eyes as he thought, "Lady Lancency, you've come to save us." Lady Gamma stepped forward with eyes burning like fire, her voice calm but heavy with power as she demanded, "What exactly happened here?" Alfredo stammered in fear, claiming it was just a simple test, but Lady Gamma's face turned hard as she snapped, "A test? You call this a test?" she asked, her eyes shifting to Damien as she sighed and commanded Alfredo to gather the trainees and step back before turning to Damien and telling him to go back to his room, though he frowned in protest before finally closing his eyes and sighing. Then she turned to Aster, telling him to go back to his room, and even though his face looked disappointed, he walked away. Gamo shouted, "Run Fit," and the shaking instructor stepped forward, but before he could apologize, Gamo cut him off coldly and said, "You're fired." Runfit's eyes went wide with shock. The scene shifts to later that night outside the Blando mansion, where the butler Alfredo bowed deeply before Lady Gamo and admitted that he had gone too far and lost control, leading Gamo to ask quietly if Damien had helped Aster spar against the trainees, only for Alfredo to shake his head and deny it. Alfredo paused, then almost couldn't believe his own words as he explained how that one magic bullet, compressed 4 or 5 times during the spar, became so deadly it could take down 5 trained students while leaving even powerful mages struggling with raw mana, which made Gamo narrow her eyes in admiration. But when she asked about the successor offer, Alfredo just sighed and said he had refused it flatly. GMO leaned back with a face I couldn't read, and I just nodded, saying, "I see." She paused to reconsider how she saw this boy, then spoke up and ordered, "Bring Aster here." A few moments later, Alfredo walked in with Aster by his side, and Lady Gamos gave him a small, polite smile. "Aster, you're here, so come and pull up a chair." Aster sat down peacefully and asked, "Did you call for me?" while Gamo nodded and answered, "Yes." "But before we go," she set a small box on the table. As blinked in surprise, Gamo nodded. "A gift?" he asked. "I heard Alfredo promised you one if you lasted a minute," she said. Her smile softened. "Here it is, made by me personally," she added, surprising Aster. "You may open it," she said kindly. Aster opened the box to find a glowing yellow orb pulsing with magic, which Gamo explained was a rare gift reserved only for the very best mages in Blando, leaving Aster to frown in suspicion while Gamo gently patted Damien's head to comfort him. "You can take this gift without worry, since it is both a thank you for your help to Damien in the Grey Zone and an apology for what happened today." Aster furrowed his brow and wondered if eating the food would force him to join that weird group called Blando. Gamo chuckled softly, shaking his head as he dismissed the thought of poison. She smiled and asked if there were truly no conditions, and after Aster nodded in agreement, he accepted the gift with a grateful heart. Gamma waved it off with a light smile, saying it wasn't a big deal at all. Aster muttered to himself that the unexpected profit wasn't bad, but Gamel's remark about her direct gaze made him uneasy, and as Gamo gently stroked Damien's hair, Aster knew this meant trouble. "I'd like to get you into the academy," she said softly, asking if you'd join Damien, and after blinking in surprise, you realized that since Damien had refused to enroll last year and fled again this time, this was your only chance to go together now that he seemed willing if his friend was there. Aster pondered that it made perfect sense for Baiana and realized this was truly a moment of great importance. She pushes him hard, but he'll just run away again, and he's actually glad about this chance to join the academy. In a world where family ties and old friendships matter most, he said with a smile, knowing that school connections are even more powerful. Yet it also feels like being tied up on a leash. "I'll think about it," replied the GMO softly, "but let me know once you've decided," she said, pausing before adding with a curious tone, "By the way, this is unrelated, but I'm curious." She narrowed her eyes and asked, "Why did you turn down Alfredo's offer to take his place?" Aster looked back at Alfredo with a mischievous smirk, recalling how he had once seen Alfredo kneeling before him, and with a playful grin, he replied, "My knees are precious, you know," leaving Gamio stunned and baffled. Alfredo looked completely crushed, while in the next scene, Aster sat quietly in his room with a hand resting over the faintly glowing magic circle etched across his chest that pulsed with light with each steady breath of the rhythm of the breathing technique he'd been perfecting as he murmured under his breath, "This must be it." The domain of gods, he frowned, remembering how he'd only managed to swallow a tiny tenth of its power, yet his mana had swelled far beyond what anyone expected. He glanced down at the faint, unfading burn mark on his chest and wondered if that strange sigil was the reason, since instead of the usual loss of strength or poison, his power felt pure and almost holy, and now his mind drifted to the Academy's strange offer. He'd been thinking about it for days, and deep down he knew joining the Academy would make finding a sponsor much easier, yet a nagging feeling warned him that it felt like walking straight into a trap. Rising to his feet and stretching, he considered taking a run or running away entirely, but just then a man with platinum blonde hair and a sharp vest stepped into the room. After glancing up and narrowing his eyes at the stranger's distinctive look, Aster muttered that only the direct Damien bloodline had such hair, realizing with a bitter thought that this must be someone from the troublesome Branch family before he awkwardly tried to speak but ended up just saying nothing, leaving the man blinking in confusion. What? You're telling me that's not him? His eyes moved over Aster from head to toe, noting the dull ash-gray hair and the unpleasant look in her eyes before she gave a small, defiant twitch of her lips. He repeated the words while his eyes flashed with danger, asking you if you truly thought they looked unpleasant and challenging you to take a closer look, only for the man to hesitate, shrug, and admit they seemed kind enough before offering an awkward smile, calling it his mistake and bowing stiffly as he turned to leave. Before Aster could even answer, Butler Alfredo dropped to his knees with such speed that it shocked them both, shouting, "Young man, no," with tears in his eyes, explaining that he had only come to clear up a misunderstanding after sleepless nights, while Aster sighed that a butler shouldn't wear out his knees so fast, only for Alfredo to shake his head furiously and insist it was all just a mistake. The platinum-haired man stared in confusion as Alfredo poured gravel with dramatic sincerity. His face changed as the truth finally clicked into place. He pointed his finger at Aster and shouted, "Those eyes. I knew it. The dead goblin's cursed eyes are unmistakable." Aster smirked with exasperation. Yeah, you got me," he admitted, only to see the man's face twist in anger. "How dare you trick me and then act this shameless?" Before he could say more, Alfredo's icy glare stopped him dead in his tracks. The man clenched his teeth and growled, "Fine, I'll let you go for now, but meet me later in the magic hall to fix that attitude of yours," and when Aster lazily agreed, the man stormed off toward the mansion while Aster watched him leave with a small smile and thought, "That's fine." He was already in a terrible mood. Then he turned to Alfredo and asked if he could meet the madam right now, and as Lady Gamo looked up from her writing with a gentle smile, Aster calmly confirmed his decision to join the academy, which surprised her so much that she immediately agreed to start preparations, allowing him to relax before he left, only for Alfredo to burst in moments later glowing with joy that he had finally agreed. Just as I expected, the fire of youth, that burning passion, and those blazing eyes were right there. Lady Gamo looked confused as he paced excitedly, promising the first semester was fine since they could pay, but fearing the second would be impossible for a stray from the black and white zone, until he dramatically raised a finger to declare that a savior would appear right then. Lady Gamo sighed and told Alfred he was being too noisy, so he quickly bowed, apologized, and hurried off to the kitchen while nearly tripping on the way. When he left, Gamo gave a quiet smile, and I knew he was happy because after so many rejections, he finally got a chance. Then her face turned grim as she realized that this academy plan was nothing but a sloppy scheme. She sighed sadly for Alfred, who had been tricked just like the old head butler, while outside, Aster stood in the courtyard and stared up at the huge, fancy magic hall, muttering that he'd finally found the troublesome Branch family kid. As he walked down a dark hallway, he saw a hooded man holding a candle, and when the stranger asked what he was doing there, Aster admitted he didn't even know his name before describing the platinum-haired boy's face. The hooded man smiled faintly, saying he was waiting for him just in time, then pointed to a nearby door and told Aster to enter, warning him to watch out for his head when he opened it. Aster frowned, yet he pushed the door open anyway, only for a pile of papers to tumble straight onto him. He coughed and muttered, finally understanding what he meant. Suddenly, a quiet voice spoke from within, saying, "Oh, you must be Aster." A man stood in the room, his robes and proud stance showing he was in charge, giving a small smile before saying, "Nice to meet you," while already feeling something was wrong as he asked, "You came to see my younger brother, didn't you?" Aster blinked in confusion, then scowled at the stranger who had called his older brother over. In a former life, Aster stood on a high balcony and stared down at another grand building while quietly joking that all magicians were just pen pushers, who he'd learned about during his days as a troubleshooter. Aster remembered the 4 stages of baldness scholars discussed, starting with hair that stops growing entirely because it can't handle the constant stress and pulling. With robes covering his head and having shaved it all off before researching magic to grow it back, Aster narrowed her eyes in the present, thinking that this man was different from her spoiled younger brother who had been too indulged and was rude to the young master's guest, so she studied him for a moment and asked if he worked at a magic research institute, to which the man smiled faintly. Aster raised an eyebrow, noting how young the deputy director was, and realized that noble houses like Blando cared more for skill than just bloodline. The deputy director's voice grew softer as he said, "You're quite unusual, Aster, and nothing like those stray dogs from the black and white district." Aster smiled softly, chuckling, "I guess that's true." The man's polite smile slipped for a second as he thought, damn it. If he were nervous, this would be so much easier. But that smile of his was so calming, he stood up straight and said, "You and I could actually get along," before casually asking if Aster had received an invitation to Xenon Academy, which he did, leading the man to warmly congratulate him and claim he was a former student, though Aster felt a bit suspicious of this sudden friendship attempt until the man laughed it off and shifted the conversation to the main topic, only for his tone to suddenly turn serious and ask if Aster would risk his life for a friend, catching him off guard before the deputy director pulled a thick, glowing book from under the table that Aster instantly recognized as the healing grimoire. That's Blando's hidden trick, yet he's showing it to me so casually. While the morning sun sparkled on Lady Gamo's silver hair as she trimmed flowers in her garden, she sighed softly and murmured to herself. At least getting into the academy was easy, which made her lips curl into a faint smile as she thought about how steady Aster remained even after hearing Damien's past. She whispered that there was no flattery in his words, a rare thing indeed, for he felt different and someone she truly wanted to keep close, though her thoughtful expression told a story of doubt. He's a free bird, and since there are so many ways to keep someone like him close, I'll need to think them over carefully. She couldn't afford to let such talent slip away. It wasn't about Damien, the scene shifted right back to Aster. His face looked calm while his mind stayed sharp as he took in the sight of Blando's secret grimoire being shown to me. Aster studied the man's eyes, which were clear and so calm she couldn't tell what his real intention was. Good or bad feelings should show in a person's eyes, but his were empty like an assassin's, as if he doesn't even know who he really is. The deputy director spoke quietly, telling Aster not to answer quickly or be tempted by the reward. Aster smiled and said he would give an answer because now that he understood, the unease was gone, and his voice turned firm to refuse. The deputy director's eyes widened a little. Aster leaned in with zero worry, reminding us that since we grew up in the same mess, there's no point in acting scared, just ask your questions, and I'll listen if the plan makes sense, but walk away if it doesn't. The man's smile vanished as his eyes turned red and he warned that refusing to listen would mean death. A's answer was sharp, and he thought dryly, go ahead and try, you only die once, but I've already done that twice. Suddenly, the man's intense presence exploded outward, washing over everyone in the room like a deadly wave. The floor groaned under the weight, yet Aster didn't move a muscle, just sat there watching him with the quiet stillness of a pond. The deputy director blinked, then chuckled softly until he finally spoke. Well done, he said, I can't help but like you, Aster. You've passed the test. He leaned back, sighing with relief. I'll be honest, I needed someone I could trust, but it couldn't be from House Blando. Inside Aster's head, he thought, I almost threw the first punch in that place. The man continued, I didn't expect much, most people from the black and white district are the same. The young master is too young to judge character, but his mother loves him deeply, so why would she let a stray like you near him unless there was something special about you? He smiled a little, and then, by luck, my brother got into a fight with you. How Aster frowned, wondering if a deputy director of a magic school would truly need an excuse to meet someone, because the whole thing felt wrong. The man nodded as if he'd read your mind, smiling a thin, serious smile to say that while taking the first step is hard, there is no family feud because the Blando house stands together as one. His voice dropped, and I realized House Dullen was watching me, which made Aster's eyes narrow as I wondered why they cared, only for him to grow quieter and admit that since I claimed not to fear death, he would finally be honest. As I was studying Deculin's legendary heavenly origin technique, Aster went silent, and the deputy director nodded, confirming that this secret art was meant only for Deculin's own bloodline, yet I had stumbled upon it by pure luck, right before Aster jumped in to speak up. He smirked, leaning in to ask how someone who should have died could still be alive and if that meant you'd already prepared a defense, only for Deculin's carelessness to nearly cost him his life even as deputy director. He stopped talking, his voice rising like a fever. But look, I only wanted countermeasures at first, then I realized the heavenly art was the root of all Dullen techniques, a way to perfect something already perfect, and as his eyes gleamed, I couldn't help but ask Aster if he understood that feeling. Aster just stared silently at him, thinking, geez, this guy isn't just a little crazy, he's properly insane, as he realized Henzi was digging into his own family's dark secrets, remembering how the past life's destruction of the Blander family by Dolene all started with Henzi's research into the Thousand Circle and the New Thousand Circle, which made Farron, the leader of Dolene, see a chance to win by risking everything to bring Deculin down on Blander. Amuses that Finn could see the promise in the New Thousand Circles right from the beginning. AA remembers the mighty Deculan leader before his thoughts fade, while Henzi asks if he's free to tackle a bigger job, explaining that he hid the secret Thousand Circle research from his family because he couldn't find a spy, and even though Asta guesses a secretary might be the leak, Henzi laughs and admits he intentionally exposed part of the formula the moment he felt watched, noting he hates dying but refuses to join Deculan since he has his own reasons. Henzi whispers to Asta that since he isn't tied to the family, he must do this task quietly on his own. Henzi admits the research is a joint effort but is stuck on his part, so he hands Asta a thesis bundle and promises a reward. If Asta delivers it to Professor Perun at Xenon Academy, Henzi will give him the healing light spell, but Asta sees this as a chance to demand more, joking that they are only true comrades if they double or nothing, which makes Henzi call him shameless before insisting on a simple yes or no. Henzi finally agrees to Asta's terms, nodding as he promises to hand over the new Thousand Circle the moment it's ready, though he insists Asta must master it first or the power would be wasted. Henzi tells Asta that once her research is done, she'll need Asta's help if they stand together as comrades. Asta smiles with confidence, saying she'll help with anything related to the thesis before jokingly claiming she can't read, which shocks Henzi until he laughs and admits it was a prank, prompting Asta to call Henzi rigid and boring, only for Henzi to sadly explain that his friendly rivalry with Professor Perun ended when he returned to the Blander family. AA wonders if Henzi is always on top or just imagining it, mutters that Professor Perun sounds like another madman at the academy, and then gazes at the magical textbooks Henzi gave him. He believes Henzi warned him to stay out of trouble and stuffed everything into a special pouch, but Asta wonders why pack so much junk, especially when he finds a letter addressed to "My Dear Aster" that he snorts at as "Dear My Ass," revealing it contains a carefully planned list of magic books and a strict study schedule from Henzi himself, who signs off as his friend and challenges Asta to grow into a worthy man. AA smiles and thinks, wondering if he's truly a lunatic or just a genius. Asta pulls away 132 books, leaving the healing grimoire and the new thesis behind in the tower, a decision he'll explain to Damien as a special favor for a friend. He soon notices that the 102 volumes Henzi gave him aren't just a pile of books, but a whole new category that any magic student needs to build their skills on. AA now sees his tower's true purpose and declares that while he once only imagined it as a quiet place for stalking and books, it will now become a beacon for anyone seeking knowledge, a revelation that fills him with genuine delight. Henzi ponders Asta, realizing that while he once planned to use him as a disposable tool and discard him like trash, this man has become something far more interesting, proving he is not just another ordinary pig. Henzi smiles at the thought that Asta is hiding things, because having a partner who stands on the same level and wants the same results feels like a new kind of magic, leaving him with only one stubborn doubt: can he really not read at all, or is that simply impossible? Alansensi steps up to Asta and says, "Sir, it's time to go." Lance explains that registration is simple upon arrival, and Lansensi confirms that both the young master and Sir Asta are exempt from the entrance exam, making Asta look every bit like a proper student in his new coat and tie as he happily accepts this special privilege for prestigious families. Damien shouts excitedly at Asta, urging him to hurry up because Lady Gamo is already waiting outside. She warns Damon to stay safe, checks in with Asta who confirms he's listening, and as Gamo wishes them success on this great chance, AA secretly smiles and plans to make those results happen for sure as they ride away in the carriage. Xenon stands as the biggest academy on the eastern land, where Asta imagines a sea of students waiting inside, while AA lays out his plan to capture them all and shouts to his classmates that he is on his way. If you loved this video, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and tell your friends about it because your support helps us grow, and I'll see you in the next one. Until then, look after yourself and keep your eyes on what's coming next.